Acts. In your Pew Bible, that's page 778, Acts chapter 9. Starting at verse 36. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha, which when translated is Dorcas, who was always doing good and helping the poor. About that time, she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa, so when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, "Please come at once." Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter sent them all out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. Then he called the believers and the widows and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. Peter stayed in Joppa for some time with a tanner named Simon. So I've done a lot of interviews over the years, and one of the questions that comes up frequently in an interview is, so, how would other people describe you? If I were to ask a group of your friends, how would other people describe you? What words would they use? And some people get very uncomfortable by this because, you know, they're basically asking you to brag about yourself. But it's an interesting question to think about what other people would say if they were asked, you know, so what's so and so like? What's Matt Peirce like? He's the one I can pick on without feeling bad. What is this person like? How would you describe them? And, I kind of went through that because when I was going through the hiring process, the search process here, Evan reached out to a bunch of my references, and, you kind of hope they know you pretty well. They focus on the good things and not maybe on those moments where you've lost your temper or whatever. And we see here in Acts that um, there's this introduction of this woman named Tabitha. And, what are the odds in all of human history that you're going to be one of the people who gets "What Would Your Friends Say About You" published in the Holy Bible that everybody reads for generation and generation and generation? And what do they say about Tabitha? She was always doing good and helping the poor. When they think of Tabitha, they think she was always doing good, she was always helping the poor. Well, Tabitha gets sick, and um, and so that's why her story is recorded here, is because she gets so sick and she dies. The word here that's used for Tabitha is this word disciple. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. So if any of you were looking at the sermon title for this week and thinking, what on earth, if you do that, I don't know if any of you do that, but thinking, what on earth does that mean? The word used for Tabitha here is Mathetria. And it's the word for a female disciple. And she is actually the only woman who that word is used for in the entire New Testament. So she's really a special person here that she warrants, she's like on par. They use the feminine version because that's how Greek works, but she's like on par with the disciples who are serving the church, serving the mission of Jesus. I was curious if this word has like a root word, and the root word is one that describes a disciple, someone who is a learner of the way of Jesus, somebody who is practicing the way of living life among the church and pursuing the mission of Jesus Christ. And then she becomes very sick and she dies. We can notice here in the story that there's a lot of tenderness around the way that she is treated as part of this community. Her body is washed and placed in an upstairs room. We're not totally sure where this is happening. It must have been in some kind of central gathering location where, when we look at the New Testament churches, they were house churches that were meeting in somebody's home. Oftentimes, it was somebody who was on the wealthier side, who maybe had a larger place and maybe had the capacity to host a lot of people. So she ends up in an upstairs room and everyone is around. Everyone is still there fussing about. Peter just happens to be nearby because he has just recently been in the town nearby that they mentioned, Lydda, where he has done another miracle. He cures a paralytic who had been bedridden, and word had gotten out and traveled. Peter is in Lydda, and he has done this amazing work. And so then this house church hears, Lydda's not that far from where we are in Joppa. Somebody go get Peter, and maybe he can help. Well, they have already, this woman is dead. They have already washed her body. They have already placed her in the upstairs room. They have already gone through the work of preparing her body and brought it to the upstairs room. But Peter still comes, and all of the widows are standing around her. That says something about Tabitha's character too, doesn't it? Because it means that she was involved in the ministry to people who had really not much to offer for themselves. The widows are the people who were some of the most overlooked people in a society, right? They had no money, no way to provide for themselves, and the early church's ministry was really focused on caring for the widows. So Tabitha has this, I keep getting confused because it's Lydda, but it's Tabitha. Tabitha has been doing this ministry to the widows. That was part of her role as a disciple, somebody who was meeting material needs of the widows in the community. And everybody comes around and they show him all of the ways that Tabitha had been providing for them, showing them robes and pieces of clothing that she had made for them. To offer someone else clothing is a way of offering dignity. Because when people, it was true then, it's true now, when people look at you and they see the clothes that you're wearing, they come up with an image of who you are, don't they? And Tabitha's ministry to these widows, to provide clothing for them, clothing that she had made with her own hands, was a way of offering dignity and allowing them to present themselves with honor. And having somebody provide that for them was a ministry and an act of love. And they're obviously very devoted to her as they bustle around and they beg for help from, and they're grieving her. So Peter sends all of the hustle and bustle out of the room. Who can think with this kind of hullabaloo going around? And he prays. He turns to her and says, Tabitha, get up. And she does. This is one of very few resurrections that happen in the Bible. And how remarkable the way, the moments that God chooses to use his power to raise somebody from the dead. And we want to reflect on this as we're 4 weeks out from Easter. We are and so we're still in the church season of Eastertide. We will be in Eastertide until June 1st, which is Pentecost. And we celebrate the Holy Spirit's coming on the church. We're still reflecting on this idea of resurrection and what it means for God to intervene in the physical nature of the natural order of life. Why would God allow for this person over probably any other number of people who had died the very same day? Why would he choose this situation? Well, that's a really big theological question. I'm not sure I can tackle it in the next 7 minutes, but what's more important is not to understand why her and not somebody else. It's what is God demonstrating through the use of this miraculous sign? When God allows people to do miracles, he's pointing to a symbolic act. Because we know that when Tabitha died, she would have gone to be with Jesus, which in our limited physical earthbound view is sometimes it's some consolation, but we still miss the person. But her ending still would have been, redeemed. God is still pointing to the reality and the truth that he has power over the natural order, that he has power even over death itself. And I wonder if, in a way, Peter's ministry to these widows is like a giving of honor to a specific group of people who had already been through so much, who had already lost so much, a group of widows who had already been stripped of their identity, been stripped of their material provision, been stripped of everything that they really needed in this life, and then they got connected to the church. And God demonstrates that he will always take care of them, and he honors Tabitha in this way. We are reminded by the work of Tabitha, and I think that it's interesting that this particular passage came out in the lectionary on Mother's Day, a day where we do honor mothers. It's hard work to be a mom, and yet there's something really beautiful about the way in this passage we see the power of community. There's a lot of data that has come out that moms now are, life is tough for moms because they have to do so much alone. And I wonder sometimes if these kinds of holidays that focus so much on the singular identity of mother contribute to the ways that being a mom is hard because you're often in it alone. And can we as the church zoom out of that? And I think we do a nice job of that here because we celebrate all women who participate in the nurturing and protective and fierce work of community. I would not be able to do a fraction of what I do if there were not other women in my life who treat my children like they're their own. One person who I'd like to celebrate is my next door neighbor, who we kind of joke that we live on like a mini commune and we have like a semi-permeable membrane that exists between our houses. And it really feels like it's the 60s. Like they just go back and forth. You know how people are always like, oh, kids don't play like that anymore. It's like 7:15 a.m. and it's like, why is there a small child in my house that doesn't belong here? It's like, oh, it's the neighbor. You know, he knows the code to get in. I'm pretty sure they have a spare key. Community is what enables the work of not just raising up the next generation, but of caring for one another through all of the stages of life. Tabitha, there's no mention of any children in this story. Tabitha's caring for the widows. She's caring for the people who are, have been left alone in some way, overlooked by society. And what happens when we do that? She is reaping what she has sown, which is people who are caring for her on her deathbed. Community is hard. Community has its moments of difficulty. You have to say uncomfortable things. You have to confront differences of opinion. And I think what is so powerful about this passage is, Tabitha, it doesn't say it here, she probably did not have any children if she was a disciple. She likely did not have any children, but she was somebody who had some sort of means and was not preoccupied with the work of the home per se. She was able to contribute to the church in a way that many other women could not. But she had community. She was part of a network of disciples and widows and other people who were who were proclaiming the gospel of Jesus through their participation in life together, through opting in on doing life together. And I wonder if here, as we see the people mourn for her and advocate for her and go to Peter on her behalf, is sort of a demonstration of the way that miracles can really happen when we opt into life together, when we share each other's burdens, when we clothe one another in dignity, literally or figuratively, depending on who you are here in this crew. As we walk through the everyday moments and the milestone moments that come when there is difficulty and tragedy strikes, that God can breathe new life into a community when we are living it together. So as we transition to this time at the table, we celebrate our unity that we have in Christ together, that our church has together. And I just encourage us to continue lifting one another up, to continue opting into each other's stories as we bring our joys and concerns to one another every week. That's one way that we do that. Because I really believe that that's how the resurrection life enters into our fellowship with one another. To show that together God can help us overcome the things that would drag us down. So when we do communion, we celebrate an open table. You are welcome to participate, whether you are a member here or not. And really, the only thing that we ask is that you are, with God's grace, doing everything that we can to follow Jesus and to seek after him. Let's, as we transition to the table, let's sing hymn number 209, Blessed be the tie that binds. And so we're just doing verse, 220. Oh, we're doing hymn number 222. Let us break bread together.